Uh-oh. Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Some recent comments from Hall of Fame promoter Frank Warren in reference to the sanctioning bodies, the alphabet organizations, which we've been talking a lot about the last week or so. Frank said, on the four-belt system in boxing, it's worked over the years. We know who the number one heavyweight is according to everybody based off the official result of a fight. And that's Usyk. We know who Inui is. There's quite a few guys out there who are considered to be the best. I think there's too many governing bodies, but the reason there is more than one, it is because it gives the boxers an option. How many boxers are there in the world? Obviously, there's only going to be a small amount that ever get to fight for a world title, but everybody deserves their chance. I've grown up through that system, to which veteran boxing scribe Mike Copinger responded, who has it worked for? Certainly not the fans, or the sport at large. Very confusing to the public. What other sport has more than one champion, let alone four? They both make valid points, Frank and Mike, from opposite sides of the aisle. It is true that to an outsider, to a casual, it's confusing seeing so many guys running around with so many belts and then different versions of those belts. Subsidiaries, interim titles, international titles, silver titles. It is a problem. It does water down what it means to be a champion in the sport of boxing when by mass manufacturing these titles, you're actually making it easier for a guy to get a belt where it's supposed to be difficult. But at the same time, without that process, if you only had one guy holding one belt, he'd be bogged down by mandatories every 10 seconds. Globally, the sport of boxing is bigger now than it was in previous eras. Globally, that more countries are producing more boxers on every corner of the planet, and thus, to have one guy holding one belt that has to defend it against them all, it just doesn't seem realistic. So you're defending this shit? I've long maintained that having four separate sanctioning bodies and four separate world titles isn't really what the problem is. The problem is when those champions don't fight each other, when a number one, a consensus number one, isn't established. That's the problem. That's where it becomes confusing. But if all the champions are mixing it up with each other after they become champions, it's really not an issue. And the process in and of itself, the mandatory process, the unification process, the undisputed process, lends an intrinsic value to a fight. A build-up, a backstory, a prestige, if you will. Because what would Fury versus Usyk have been if it weren't for Undisputed? That's what made it such a momentous occasion, that it had been 25 years since the last Undisputed champion. And the same applies to Bivol and Beterbiev. That build-up and wanting to see the two remaining champions mix it up with each other was amplified because we hadn't seen an Undisputed champion in the light heavyweight division for decades. So it's not for nothing. Now, I'm not arguing in favor of manufacturing an entire assembly line of secondary titles and baby belts, trinket belts. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that so long as absolution is brought to a division with some regularity, the number of titles in it isn't really a problem. I saw veteran boxing scribe Adam Catterall. He don't like the belt situation any more than Mike does. He said the WBA, WBC, WBO, and IBF will become as noteworthy as the IBO. As we've been saying on Fight Disciples for 9 years, the only noteworthy belt in boxing is the ring. You only get one by beating the best. One champion per division as it should be.
That's true. You don't get a Ring Magazine title for nothing. You gotta fight somebody good.
Former champion Tony Bellew didn't like that. He said, so you've been saying the WBC is no good for 9 years? Okay, mate, can you please explain why you see the icons of my sport holding it then?
Uh-oh.
Ali, Tyson, Leonard, Mayweather, Lennox, the list goes on and on. Real fighters will always chase the big four alphabet belts, regardless of what you and anyone else says. You're wrong for suggesting otherwise. Boxing is not MMA or UFC. I love both, but people have to realize they are completely separate. What Dana's done with the UFC is amazing, and no one can doubt that, but he created it so he could control it. Boxing, on the other hand, is a whole different animal. To which Adam Catterall responded, no, that's not what I said. I said the only worthy belt is the ring, given it's a lot harder to get one. I stand by the notion that the best thing for the sport is to have one champion per division. Multiple champions per division is confusing for fans and ultimately turns them away. It allows promoters and those that run the sport to hide behind politics. When a fight fans want to see doesn't materialize. Just because something is a certain way doesn't mean it's the right way. We are both in and around the same age, so the four-belt era is what we know. So there's heritage in that. But what about before us? The business of boxing is what is broken. It doesn't work for the fan. Only recently has it been reignited by Turki El Sheikh, who's got everybody's attention by speaking in pound notes, which has eliminated the politics many hide behind. Real fighters don't chase belts in reality. I'm sure they're nice to chase the toughest challenges and the glory that comes with that, the right to be called the man. If you're honest with yourself, that's why you fought Usyk. The chance of that glory. Finally, the fighters you mentioned above, yes, they held the WBC, but they were all number one, undisputed, multiple weight, ring holders. Granted, some didn't hold the ring. They stopped awarding for a period.
Let me just chime in. Tony Bellew sees the function and the purpose of those belts where Adam Catterall does not. There is a reconciliation, a middle ground for what they both want, and that is if everybody is fighting everybody. Adam doesn't like the belts because he feels like it gives guys a way to hide. You can remedy that by removing the obstacles and making the fights.
Like I said, I don't think Adam Catterall would have as much of an issue with 4 separate sanctioning bodies and 4 separate champions if all 4 of them fight each other to ultimately crown one champion, because for him that's what it's all about, crowning one champion per weight. I think there needs to be a process so that you can build up those big fights, those big names.
There is an intrinsic value to that process that I don't think you can substitute. Believe it or not, some things do need to marinate. A little, not too much, not for years.
But just some. Enough that a fight has a backdrop, a stage. Adam continued, my opinion is that of a fan looking from the outside on, and why change is needed, because the model doesn't suit me, the fan. You were a fighter. You had a dream and achieved it. Nobody can take the worth of that away. The business model, though, suits you. That isn't a dig. It's an observation on how boxing is currently set up.
The problem with boxing really isn't the number of belts. It's the sides of the street. It's, my guys aren't going to fight your guys.
And where the sanctioning bodies come into it is where all this bureaucratic red tape could be holding up a fight or holding up some fights. The promoters tell themselves, well, we don't need to make those fights because our guy has a belt.
They think that their fighter can operate like an island. They think their promotions can operate like an island. And they can't. See, that's the real problem. It's not the number of belts. It's that fights that need to happen weren't happening often enough. Too much separation.
Thankfully, Turkey has remedied that situation, and he means to continue to do so.
He's removing obstacles.
And as much of a pain in the ass as these sanctioning bodies can be, what's at the heart of the matter is fighters not fighting each other.
More than alphabet organizations, because what you really want are the fights.
It's your real problem that has been everybody's problem. That's what it's all about. Don't win a belt and then go hide.
Hold it hostage.
Look, man, it's about the fights. It's all about the fights, and everything takes a back seat to the fights.
One fight, one rematch that they're working on, the Alexander Usyk versus Daniel Dubois rematch that would presumably be for undisputed, They seem to be working on it.
The proposed rematch between Usyk and Dubois for the undisputed heavyweight title could be bound for London's Wembley Stadium, according to Usyk's promoter. Usyk and Dubois first fought for the IBF, WBA, and WBO titles in August of 2023, well over a year ago, when following controversy regarding a punch thrown by Dubois that was ruled low. Usyk won via stoppage. Dubois, 27, has since admirably rebuilt via stoppages of Jarrell Miller, Filip Prgovic, and Anthony Joshua, in doing so, earning and defending the IBF title that Usyk vacated between his victories over Fury. It was at the conclusion of the second of those victories in December that Dubois confronted the 38-year-old Usyk and demanded a rematch. Dubois was to defend his title against Joseph Parker on February 22nd until illness forced his withdrawal during fight week, but instead of a fight with Parker being rescheduled, the priority of both camps appears to be agreeing to Usyk versus Dubois 2. We are now working on this fight, Usyk versus Dubois 2. Usyk's promoter, Alex Krasiuk, told Sky Sports, Wembley is one of the options. Dubois, who on Sunday was named the British Boxing Board of Control's Boxer of the Year for last year, his trainer Don Charles was awarded the trainer's equivalent, had previously told the same news outlet, "My next fight I'm working towards. I'm ready for it now. I've gotten even better than I was against AJ. That was just what it was at the time, a special moment, but I need to be even better than I was. Still the Kingslayer. I'm the man to beat the man. Bring them on." When receiving his award, Don Charles had said, "Daniel Dubois has set the whole scene alight, but it's not complete. There is so much more work to do." Some speculate that Daniel wasn't actually ill, that he pulled out of the Parker fight because it was a high-risk, low-reward fight, and why do that when you can fight Usyk?
That's how some people feel. I myself wrestle with that notion because I feel like Daniel was going to steamroll Joseph. I feel like Daniel was going to overpower him the same way that Joe Joyce overpowered him.
I take it that some of these people that think Daniel just ducked Joseph Parker are people that picked Joseph Parker to win, and that's really where that sentiment comes from.
I get it.
There is a fiscal perspective, too, that why box Joseph Parker on an undercard and roll the dice with him when you can headline opposite the ring Usyk?
For more money.
A chance for revenge.
There's just one problem with this strategy. Where Usyk and Daniel are prioritizing their rematch, the WBO has gone ahead and ordered the fight between Oleksandr Usyk and Joseph Parker.
So this is the second time that one of these sanctioning bodies would have gone ahead and ordered a fight in spite of Turki El Sheikh's wishes. Not dissimilar from what we see at light heavyweight with David Benavidez and Dimitri Bivol. They know Turki wants to do a trilogy between Dimitri and Artur, but they ordered their fight anyway. The same applies here. They know that they're working on a Usyk versus Dubois rematch, and you pick now to order this thing?
It's important to note that Frank Warren represents both. He represents Daniel Dubois like he represents Joseph Parker. He's the registered promoter on his behalf.
The official letter reads, "Please be advised that WBO's World Championships Committee is hereby ordering the commencement of negotiations between the subject matter's fighters to discharge the WBO mandatory championship obligation in the heavyweight division. By virtue of this order, the WBO interim championship shall be terminated expeditiously in compliance with our institutional policy of only one world champion per weight class. The parties have 30 days to reach terms." They haven't given them a lot of time. "Failure to do so will result in this committee ordering a purse bid proceeding in accordance with WBO regulations of World Championship contests."
And the clock starts now.
Now.
30 days from the time the letter is set out. That's how long they've got to either make a fight,
Reach a deal.
get Joseph Parker to step aside, and get the WBO to stand down. Usyk versus Dubois commercially is bigger than Usyk versus Parker, but I actually like Usyk versus Parker more because I want to see Usyk against some new blood. You know, he had a rematch with Anthony, a rematch with Fury.
4 fights between 2 guys. Now with Daniel, that's another rematch. 6 fights between 3 guys. The Parker fight intrigues me a little more. I think that Frank Warren would prefer to do the Dubois fight because commercially it's bigger. It's bigger for Daniel, it's bigger for him.
For the platform, for the UK boxing scene, it's bigger. It's a stadium fight.
And on that predication, maybe they can wrangle a situation where Joseph Parker steps aside, let him fight on the undercard against an easy guy, no one that jeopardizes his status as WBO interim champion. Remember that Usyk versus Dubois is a unification match, and you can use that to circumvent a mandatory. So maybe they can work it out that way to allow this rematch to happen, because fiscally it is bigger, and that matters.
Has Daniel Dubois really changed so much from the time that Usyk fought him?
Tactically and technically, I don't see any major changes so much as a change in his demeanor, his confidence level. He's become a man now.
He's got a kid on the way, he's banging a Brazilian broad. It's great.
But from a nuts and bolts boxing perspective, he looks like the same Daniel to me, just a bit more confident. And some of that confidence is coming from his corner, Don Charles, who I think has been very good for Daniel.
Though being honest, he doesn't seem that different to me that I feel he's going to end Usyk's reign as champion and give him his first loss. The fact that the Usyk people were so receptive to this rematch, they have no problem with it.
I don't imagine that Daniel is going to go into that second fight, if it happens, and do anything differently. What, he's going to go in there, charge forward, try for big punches the same way he did before. Usyk just has to show the same wherewithal to outlast him and punch him in between.
Wear him down bit by bit, because that is how Usyk gets these guys.
Now, it's important to note that this fight would be happening in Daniel's neck of the woods and not Usyk's per se. Their initial meeting took place in Poland, but a lot of Ukrainians are held up in Poland during the conflict with Russia. So he's basically fighting in front of a hometown crowd, so to speak. Whereas this time, Daniel would have home field advantage. Special attention is going to go into who officiates the match.
Who's going to be the third man in the ring? Who's going to score it? Things that Usyk has to keep in mind. He stopped Daniel before, took it out of the judge's hands.
I think he still can at 38. I do think he's got one more good one left in him. That doesn't mean that Daniel isn't a threat. That doesn't mean that Daniel doesn't stand a chance. That just means that rematches are often won by the fighter who can change, the fighter who can adjust. And that still is Usyk more than Daniel. What's Daniel going to do differently?
He's going to go in there, he's going to look for the knockouts.
There's not a lot of nuance in that. Not a lot of mystery. He's going to go in there, charge forward, try for big punches.
He's going to go in there, he's going to look for the knockout.
I think you still got to give the edge to Usyk. Circumstances would be slightly different, but I still think he'd be the betting favorite going in.
Let's not put the cart before the horse, though. As of now, he's under orders to face Joseph at a time where they're negotiating a Dubois rematch. We have to see, what does he decide to do? He said he's got 2 more fights before he calls it a career.
Could those 2 fights be Joseph then Daniel, or Daniel then Joseph? We'll see. I like either fight, irrespective of what direction he goes in. I like a Parker fight, I like a Dubois rematch. It's all fine by me.